And there we are, live with another episode of Three Candid Questions with Carolina. Yay! So excited to have you here, Carolina.
So excited to be here. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm super curious to see where the conversation takes us today. But before we jump right in, please introduce yourself for our lovely audience.
Okay, so I am Carolina Bakker. I am a business and a life coach, an intuitive mindset coach, I like to call myself. I'm so it's mindset is the part where I do a lot of science, and the intuitive part is mostly well, like it says, intuitive.
Yes.
We'll get back to that a little bit later. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mostly support people with growth and being growth in their business, going from nothing to something or from something to more, um,
Mm-hmm.
improving, and with people growing in their personal lives, being it emotionally, mentally, um, and so opening up their world to new perspectives, and opening up their world to see which patterns they have and which patterns they would like to break through to get to the next level of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yes, a short introduction. I live in Portugal.
Mm.
Maybe nice to know, which has a very nice temperature at the moment, and the sun is out. And with my husband and three cats by now.
Yes.
I and well, I've been in this business for 12 years, almost 13, um, and I've loved it since the very beginning. Um,
Mm.
I I went full time around 3.5, 4 years ago, around a year and a half before COVID.
Yes.
Um, Before that, I was working in corporate as well, part time, while I was doing my coaching business on weekends, evenings, and basically when I wanted to coach somebody on Sunday morning because I didn't have anywhere else to fit them, my husband said, "You know what? No." And so
Yes.
that's when I moved into full time.
Mm.
So yes, I think that's it about me. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, super exciting and really interesting to see that you have been a coach for such a long time, but only after like several years putting it into your free spaces, that's when you finally came to the point. Now I'm going to go all out full time.
Yeah, there was a moment when I really felt like this. I didn't want to give it up, and
Mm,
but I also really liked my corporate job, and I love working with people in general. And
mm.
I guess that's one thing you have to love when you're a coach. Um,
Absolutely.
and so I worked with large teams, and so
Mm,
I liked that talking to people the entire day, and seeing them, and well, seeing them, not really. I worked from home, remote,
mm,
almost 8 years. Um, and so I worked remote a lot, but I heard people from all over the world, that
yes.
international thing, and so it was fun as well. It was part of my what I enjoy to do, and so it took me a while to let go of that corporate part,
Yeah.
and fully step into my coaching. And at that moment where I needed to make that decision, I realized that um, uh, coaching for me is seeing an individual grow and seeing somebody reach a next level
Mm,
is much for me much more um, satisfying would be the
mm-hmm.
word, I guess,
Yeah.
than seeing a big corporate company take the next level step, let's say.
Mm, mm.
So yes,
Yeah.
all about people.
I can totally resonate with that, of course, as a coach as well. So I do see how a growth of an individual can excite you so much more than even a bigger organization. Although an organization, of course, is also about people, but it's not as close up and not as intimate in a way.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And
Mm,
so yeah, growth. I like the. I guess I'm very growth minded, and it's one of
mm,
my core values as well,
mm,
in what I do and my unconscious decisions.
Yeah.
are based on growth. Um, and one of my other core values I found out was contribution. So I guess
Mm.
that those two together make it a good combination to do this full time, and I haven't regretted it a moment, of course.
Yeah.
And so yes, that's sort of how I got into that.
Mm. How about the other very strong ability that you have that I'm very curious about? You know that? So, do you want to tell us a little more about that? Because it's something that you haven't brought into the limelight in the past. And I'm just very excited to hear more about that particular skill that you have.
Okay, yes, I can talk about that. So
Awesome.
it's like I said, it's so my title, let's say,
Hmm.
is intuitive mindset coach. So there's I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction on that. There's
Yeah, please.
a mindset piece on that. So the mindset piece on that is
Mhm.
science based.
Yeah.
It's purely how do you grow the brain? How do you create neural pathways that are stronger, for example, for confidence, so that they overpower the insecurity that you have. So
Mm.
it's a lot of science. um, and I am very scientific. I used to be in tech businesses. I have a very strong technical mind, let's say.
Mm.
That's the one end. So the other end is the intuitive, and the
Mhm.
intuitive is a part that I have very strongly, but it has a background. There's an underlying basis for that. So the intuitive is more that uh, I truly believe that the universe is always looking out for us,
Mm.
and is always working in our favor. Even through hardship, there's always a blessing. And for a very long time, I hid my intuition, mostly
Mm.
because it was more than just intuition. So I am a medium and
Mm.
I am a psychic. And that means that I use that in my coaching as well. And it sort of, you have to look at it as a funnel. A lot of information comes to me, and when I'm normally open, I can control that. By the way, what comes to me and what doesn't.
Mm.
When I open all the hatches, let's say, a lot of information comes in. um, and when I'm in a coaching session, I funnel that into just for that person. um, so throughout um, so that's the intuitive part of the coaching, of the title.
Mm.
um, and so that ability, it took me a long time to step into the world with that,
Mm.
um, and to say that out loud. And I don't think I really said that out loud until the last 6 years. 6 years.
Mm.
So I'm not gonna tell my age, but let's say I'm in the 40s. People can find it on the internet if they want to. I'm in my 40s.
Okay, somewhere in your 40s. And for the last 6 years of those, you have
And
gotten
for the
through.
last thing, when I was still in my 30s, I, I at some point, I at some point thought, okay, I felt more comfortable. There was so every child, I believe, has a stronger, not strong, not necessarily strong, but stronger ability than any adult
Hmm.
to tap into the spiritual world. And
Hmm.
to see spiritual things. And that's why a lot of times you see, babies giggle in nothingness, right? They look up, they giggle, and you don't really have a clue what they're giggling about. Well, my belief is that they're giggling at someone, and
Mm.
at someone that they see that we cannot. Simply because all their senses are still so open, their energy is still so receptive. Um,
Mm.
and so children tend to be more open. And then, of course, society kicks in, and you get, even in kindergarten, you get taught that you can play with certain toys, and you can you have to move through a certain circle of life, right? You have a couple of
Yes.
years of this, and then you have a couple of years of that, and then you have the next phase, and then you're in adolescence, you have to do this. And
Mm.
so society constantly forms us, and unless we nurture and or whether we have it very strongly, like I had it, or
Mm.
it's nurtured, children often lose that ability. And even I had a moment where, even though it's very strong in me and I was born with it, even I had this moment when I put a cap on my on seeing things, on hearing things,
Mm.
because society taught me that it was something weird, right? It's a little
Mm.
bit of woo woo, and, it's not um, not accepted. And
Yeah.
so I remember very clearly that at some moment when I was 7, I decided that this wasn't going to serve me, and so that I'd better keep it in a bit more and
Mm.
not tell people about what I heard. And I can understand that people sometimes were a little bit like, ooh, standoffish, and say,
Mm.
oh, that child knows way more than she's supposed to. And of course, as a child, you speak most of the time, especially when you're young, you speak the truth. And so hearing the truth from a 6 or 7 or 5-year-old, often for a lot of adults, was very confrontational.
Mm.
And so I remember consciously making that choice, like, okay, it's best not to put this forward as much as I'm doing that today. But it was still there, and
Mm.
and I I could feel a lot, and I have, whenever somebody was in a certain mood, I would feel that mood, and sometimes even take over some of that. So when
Mm.
somebody was super sad, I could just by being close to that person, I could feel that sadness so much that it made me sad as well. And happiness, the same thing, right? It wasn't just
Mm.
sadness. Happiness is easier because people smile and you interact more, and so sadness can be something on the inside that people don't show,
Mm.
but I could still feel it. And so I I I could still feel that, and throughout my while I was growing up, um, I very I let me think about how to phrase that. I suppressed it. That's the
Mhm.
best word I can. That's the best word I can give for that. And so what I used to see very clearly in front of me now became something passing at the, like, at the edges of my sight,
Mm.
and something that instead of hearing full sentences and words, I would hear sounds and music. I
Mm.
still I
Mhm.
still have that, by the way, and a lot of people made jokes about that because I could, even suppressing it, I often had what other people called a radio station in my head.
Mhm.
So I would be in my own world listening to music, and it would change. And at some point there was a man who told me, it's kind of funny, your radio station always has exactly that song of what I am internally struggling with.
Oh, that's interesting.
And he started to ask me, and I noticed that he started to ask me, what are your, and like in a teasing way,
Mm.
what's on your radio station today? And I would say, well, it's this particular song. And he apparently
Mm.
kept a record, like, okay. And we met a lot for coffee or tea, like 2 or 3 times a week. And at some point he started recognizing a pattern. He said, every time I ask you, you have a song in your head that exactly specifies my mood.
Mm.
And so that was when I was I don't know, 17, 18.
Mm.
And it started to, and I started to think, why do I have that? I thought I suppressed that well. And, but of course, there's no such thing as suppressing something that's so strongly and that's such a big part of you.
Mm.
And actually, at that moment, there was this moment where I needed to choose for what I was going to study, and so I really didn't know. I liked just about everything because, like I said, growth is one of my main values. So it was like, oh, but I can do this and I can do that and I can,
Yes.
all these fantastic things. And oh, I'd really love to learn uh, how to be a doctor, and I want to learn how to build a car, and I want to, everything, everything, everything.
Mm.
And so but I did want to have a degree because back then I thought that, and I still do. Society taught me that if you have a degree, that will make you more valuable in life.
Mm.
And so, I wanted that A degree, whichever degree. So back then they printed these booklets from all the studies that were there in this moment. I was living in the Netherlands, and all the studies that were there, and I let fate decide. So I took a pen, I opened the booklet, and I closed my eyes, and I told basically the universe, what I
Mm.
called it back then. I said, okay, you tell me what I'm going to study. And I pinned down, and that's what I went to do. and, and so and so even though I I suppressed these things, and it turned out to be exactly what I
Mm.
needed for what I'm doing today, exactly what I needed for what I needed to get to where I am, right?
Mm.
And but that's only those things you only know in hindsight, because when I looked at that, it's like, am I going to study that? Um, you know, and so and so. But yeah, I left it up to the universe, and I
Mm.
said, I'm going to trust that this is the right thing to do. So um and so I did, and in hindsight it was exactly
Mm.
what I needed. um and so things like this, I played with the universe as but I still suppressed it at the same time. And then
Yeah.
and throughout my life I kept suppressing it, but being energy aware, like
Mm.
very curious, and but also very aware that sort of I had this fear that if I would dip my toe into this world of spirituality, if I would only dip my toe, there would be a sea monster like Loch Ness coming to swallow me
Mm.
up, you know,
Yeah.
and that I would be completely immersed again in this world that I fought so hard to not show to anyone, and
Mm.
that I tried so hard not to be and not to have. And um but people around me did notice in their own ways. I had, for example, later in corporate life, I was still suppressing all this, uh,
Mm.
but people would teasingly call me the oracle, because
Oh. Okay.
yes, even though intuition, I always say intuition can't be put in a spreadsheet, right? But I knew that throughout my corporate jobs, there were certain decisions that that every number on the page said something completely different, but the my gut feeling, my intuition just told me this is not the right way to move forward.
Mm.
And I started to I did that, apparently did that so often, made decisions completely opposite of what the spreadsheet would tell us. And
Mm.
then that turned out to be right, that people started to notice. And that sometimes they would say, so what do you think? And I would start in a meeting, and I would start saying, well, I think the numbers are, no, what do you feel? Now, I
Mm.
must say, I worked at tech companies, and with so that was a big thing.
Yeah.
What do you feel? I mean,
Mm.
I remember the first couple of times when I went into a meeting room, and and there were I was the only woman, and there were 40 people, and
Mm.
tech, of course, back then was much more male dominated.
Yeah, it was.
And I knew I would wake up the entire crowd, let's say, whenever I would say, "Well, I feel that we should," and everybody sort of thought, "Oh dear, feelings. What do we do with that?"
Uh-oh.
Um, so kind of funny,
Mm.
and so I used it as that. Sorry, I'm talking a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, it's super interesting. There's one question that popped into my head as you were talking about this monster, grabbing you by your toe if you were to dip your and then swallowing you up, basically. Where do you think that this very strong fear that this world would suck you up came from?
That's a very good question. So I think there's events in my life that happened,
Mm.
and I think there's generational fear. And I think there's projected fear
Hmm.
in this story. So let me first go into what generated the fear in me.
Hmm.
Um, so I had when I was so that moment that I told you that I felt that I needed to suppress something when I was 7, when I
Yeah.
needed to start suppressing it to the outside world, and suppress it in general because it was too overwhelming for me as a child.
Mm.
Um, that moment, that had a very clear event, which I decided that, why I decided that.
Mm.
So I remember as a child, I would always see at night in the dark. I would see during the day things were clearer, things were lighter, the activity was less dense.
Hmm.
It's it's almost as if the spirits during the day, the world is so crowded that they feel they have to evade us too much, and they sort of
Mm.
stay in they stay a bit more like they're resting. And then
Hmm.
when people sleep, that the spirits get more active because there's more space for them to move around.
Mm.
And so at night, as a child, and I don't remember a day in my childhood that I didn't have this. At night, I would see shadow figures in my room. I would see um, I would see lights, like little stars, but floating in my room. I would see like there was a um, you you know when on TV you have this moment when the TV isn't working, and you get that gray white type
Oh,
of
like on the
um,
really old, yeah, like the old school TVs. Hmm.
yeah. So I would see those images and things floating, and I would feel touches.
Mm.
I would feel so many things, and often they kept me out of my sleep. I wouldn't be
Mm.
able to sleep for a long time, falling asleep. And I remember I couldn't block that. I've never been able to block that. So even in the years after that, I would crawl into a corner and of my bed, basically looking
Mm.
in the other direction, so that I wouldn't have to look into the empty space that had all these things that I could see but not
Mm.
identify.
Mm.
And so it's like, if you have a pitch dark room, which my room was, if a person would walk there, you wouldn't see them either, right? You would just see the shadow of
Yeah.
whoever was walking there, or if an animal would. So it would be the same for me. And so I remember being that was my fear. And
Mm.
I remember there was one time when I really felt as a child, so that specific event, I really felt threatened.
Mm,
And I'm not saying that whoever was in my room at that moment is threatening, but a child's mind in general, right? If you have a nightmare as a child, a child having a nightmare of walking in a street by themselves in the dark would be a nightmare. But for an
mm,
adult, walking in the streets by themselves would be you would wake up, you would think, oh, well, that was not a very nice dream, and you would fall back
mm,
asleep. While children with that same walking by themselves in an empty street in the dark, they would get up, they would wake up sweating, they would, and they would not be able to sleep for another 30 minutes, and often need their parents to comfort them. So that's of course the difference in that. So for me, even though that that appearance in my room might not have been threatening, for me it felt very threatening.
mm,
And in my child's brain, that was at that moment was terrifying.
mm,
And I remember I jumped out of bed this time, and I for many times I could just calm myself down. I could stay in my bed. I was taught to stay in my bed, right? Because my father worked very hard to provide for the family. My mother worked very hard, and so they needed their sleep, which makes sense.
mm,
If your child wakes you up every night, you don't get to live your life and to move through your day in a healthy way.
mm,
But this particular time, I jumped out of bed. I opened my door. I ran down. My parents were one flight of stairs below me. And I opened the door, and I remember I went in, and then I thought to myself, and I remember thinking, I get emotional about it.
mm,
Um, I remember thinking, looking at them sleeping, and they didn't wake up yet. And I remember thinking, but what am I going to tell them?
mm,
They won't be able to see what I see. They don't experience what I experience. They don't hear what I hear. So what can I tell them? And that was sort of the moment where I thought, okay, I have to deal with this. I have to deal with this myself. This is not the place to get support for this, even
mm,
though my parents are very supportive, don't get me wrong. But
mm,
they didn't understand. They didn't see. They didn't hear. They didn't feel. And so, and on top, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it.
mm,
Um, and so I went back up into my room. I covered myself with a blanket. I crawled into a corner, and I told myself, and now this is going to stop. Now I don't want this anymore. Um, for a lot of children that works. For a lot of
mm,
children, they make that decision at some point in their lives that it's too scary, and they cut the connection. For me, it didn't.
mm,
And so what happened with me is that this ability is so strong in me, and was already so strong in me back then, that what happened is that I could still feel, and I could
mm,
still hear, and I could still see, but I couldn't see contours. I couldn't see colors. I could just see something vague. I couldn't
mm.
hear words or sentences. I could just hear sounds, like the
Yeah,
music thing.
yeah,
But
yeah.
and or knocking on something. But it all so yes. And so for me, it got even though it got less, and the activity around me got less, it also got scarier in some way,
Mm,
because I could still feel it there, but I could no longer, let's say, grab it almost.
yeah.
It sounds like a very strange way to describe it, but at the beginning I had the sensation that I could almost grab it, and now
Mm,
it was like transparent, and I could see that there was something there, but it wasn't that solid anymore for me.
mm,
So it became more difficult.
mm,
And since it became more difficult, it also became scarier.
yeah.
Let me and so. so I struggled with that basically until I was, and I remember this moment, until I was 24 years old. I was living in my own house back then. Um, and again, I was woken up at night. And this time normally when I woke up at night, it was something like I could just, I could sort of say, okay, guys, not now. And
Mm,
then that would calm me down enough by the time I was 24, I realized that it was that probably these were entities coming towards me,
mm,
and probably drawn by the strongness of my mediumistic abilities.
mm,
I'm not sure. I never asked actually if spirits can see that, or can feel that, or can feel the proximity of somebody that might be able to communicate with them.
mm.
Um, so I would still, or maybe if everybody wakes up but just is not aware of what they're waking up with,
Yeah,
that could
that's a
also
good
be
point. Might also be the case. Yeah.
might also be the case. And so I remember that um, I at some point, this was an entire week, and it was the same energy. I felt that energy, and I felt it. The first night I wasn't bothered, because then I would do my own ritual and I turn around, but it became more persistent.
Mm,
And it became so persistent at some point that I started to fear it. And I also recognized it from, or I thought I'd recognized it from the years before. So this wasn't the first time that this particular spirit, and it's very difficult to explain how I knew,
mm,
but I felt it's just it was that feeling of I know you. It was
mhm,
like if it was like seeing feeling that you're with a a a feeling of recognition,
mhm,
that I know you. And I realized that that knowing has always, with this particular spirit, was always fear. And so
mm.
it wasn't just I know you, it was also I have always been afraid of you.
Yes.
And that's and I don't know how far it went back, but I thought about that later. For how far
Mm,
did we go back with each other? How often were you there when I crawled under my blanket not wanting to see anything? And at and I was so, up to this moment, I didn't, like I said, I didn't have any real control over it. I
mm,
didn't have, it was things just showed up when they wanted to. Things just happened when they needed to, I guess. I could suppress it very well, but I really didn't have any control. And so this spirit became more persistent, more persistent, more persistent, more persistent, and I became more more fearful,
mm,
and with each passing day. And then after a week, I was just so fed up. My eye, the blue under my eyes practically hung on my knees by that time. I didn't sleep. I ate very little. Um,
mm,
and so I looked horribly.
mm,
And people were also saying, "Are you getting some sleep? Are you sick?" No, I'm not.
mm,
No, yes, no, I'm not sleeping that well. No, and I got at some point, there was this moment that a couple of times, the moment I felt. I'm not sure, maybe I was asleep already for an hour, but I felt that the moment I fell asleep and I was finally asleep, it woke me up again. And then
mm,
I fell asleep and I was finally, and it woke me up again. And I got so angry, but so angry. And I don't think I've ever been angry at a person like that in my life,
mm,
ever. And I gathered all my strength and I started screaming and fighting and saying, and this is the drop. I am not doing this anymore. you guys, and I was just talking to you, you have to imagine me sitting in a room like the size of this room in my bed and it was like an annex to the house with
Mm.
paper thin walls. So I'm pretty sure that everybody in the neighborhood heard me scream and I woke up some people. But anyway, I didn't care. I didn't care. I
Mm.
didn't care about what people thought. I didn't care what anybody. It was just like I am taking back control. Now I'm taking
Mm.
back control. And from that moment onwards, I because I took back control, it gave me this ability to it my ability started opening up again. And
Mm.
I started hearing things more clearly, like the songs in the back of my head. And I started getting more intuition, as what people would call
Mm.
it, or um, I connected better with people on an emotional level. I started finding, give me 1 second.
Yeah,
I realize I'm still sniffing a bit.
that's okay.
um, and so I realized that um, I, I, I could actually, in this capacity of controlling, I could actually use it for my benefit, and that sounds horrible,
Mm.
of course. But that I, I could let this guide me,
Mm.
and I started gently calling this the universe to people whenever people or my intuition, intuition tells me,
Mm.
um, I feel that, right? Or I feel this is more aligned with the universe, and I started using terminology like that. Um, and I started to open up my world bit by bit to the possibility that maybe these spirits came to me for a reason.
Mm.
I must say I still haven't found out the exact reason. Most of these spirits still come to me, um, and well, when and I hear things, but like with the songs and the guy that I knew, um, that was the same thing. It pops in my head, um, and if I would have expressed that at that moment, he would have probably found some solace maybe in that,
Mm.
some something, and so things started to come to me in different modalities. I started to see clearer. I started to hear clearer, feel again, and most of this. So um, in mediumship, I started to expand. By the way, by finding um, people and organizations that are built on mediumistic or psychic
Mm.
people, and so I started to connect. That's only like I said 6 years ago, but
Mm.
um, and not even organizations are. It was quite difficult to find them. So the
How
moment that
did
I
you?
accepted that,
Yeah.
well, thank God for internet. Um, and I I guess that I at some point just asked as well. I found very coincidental Facebook ads suddenly, like I don't know where this goes and I don't know what to do with that. And I would scroll through Facebook and there would be an ad, or there would be a person actually talking about something like this.
Mm.
And um, I would find that people that I didn't know, or people that I knew for years, suddenly started opening up about their abilities,
Oh,
and
that's interesting. Yeah.
and so that we could have a conversation about that. So I do very strongly believe that the energy that you put out there
Mm.
um, is what comes back to you in the in real life, right? It's also when you I truly believe that um, when you radiate that you are that you have that you're comfortable talking about these types of subjects, that people will feel that, people will sense that, people will pick up on that,
Mm,
um, like I would pick up on that. And I also decided to sometimes when in a conversation with somebody and it's not flowing, to just put it out there. Are you
mm.
spiritual? And then people would think, oh, that's not a subject I want to talk about. And people would either think, what did she just ask me? And I would say,
Mm,
yes, I am. And this is how it shows up in my life. Or they would say, no, I'm not. And they would
mm.
probably turn around thinking, oh, woo woo, and and walk away, which is also fine.
Yeah,
We don't have to be liked, and we don't have to get along with everybody.
no,
We have to get along with the right type of people. So.
absolutely. That's what I was thinking as I was listening to your story. Like, there's so much power in accepting who we truly are and all the talents and skills, and even if it's not accepted, so to speak, in conventional society, once we come to terms with it and we start putting it out there, the opportunities, the people, everything that we need can come to us.
Hmm.
So that's what I was thinking, like this, the trust that, okay, I'm myself, and then stuff just comes my way, being myself. But it can be quite a challenge when we don't fit into conventional boxes. And what I can hear you say is like, you were, even as a child, very much alone with that experience, that can be very scary.
Yes. So as a child, it's I think scarier than at any other moment in your life.
Mm,
Your survival depends on how much other people like you and how much other people accept you, right? At, I mean, that's your survival with your parents is one of
mm,
them. And we have so much love for our parents that whatever they do, we sort of accept,
mm,
and we think, well, if it's in our small brains. I mean, being a being dependent on somebody else for your survival makes you put them on a pedestal, right? And so
mm,
if your parents say that something is not there, or if your parents say that you are making it up, or if your parents say there's no monster in the corner of your room, um, at some point there's a you can, as a child, you stop pushing for that, right? Because you want your parents to love you, and if you they're the adults, they're the bigger ones, you're the smaller one, and they know best.
yeah,
That's what, as a child, you would think they know best. So if
of
they
course.
say there's no monster under my bed, if they say there's nobody standing in my closet, if they say that the stars that I see at night are really just my imagination, then
Mm,
they must be right. And parents on their end, they do everything to keep their children safe, right? And
mm,
it's, as a parent, it's terrifying. I would think that as a parent, seeing your child being afraid of something is the most
mm.
terrifying thing there is, especially if whatever your child is afraid of, you cannot grab and shake and throw out the window,
Yeah,
right?
and maybe even understand and grasp what is going on. I think that can, with something like your ability, it's not widely spoken of, and there's not a lot of support also that parents could seek to understand, okay, what's actually going on with my child. Yeah. I mean, I can share that from my own experience. We have spoken about that before. So, um, yeah, you are right. It's a very strong interplay of the child being afraid and helpless, but also the person who is meant to protect them and support them feeling helpless, probably in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of parents solve that by saying, "Hey, don't worry, sweetie, there's nothing there."
Mm,
while in fact, for a child at that moment, it would be super helpful if their parent would say, "I cannot see what you can see," and I mean, not deny the fact that it might be there, because I mean,
Hmm.
electricity was something that wasn't measured for a long time, even
Yeah.
though. Uh, so there's a lot of things that that we cannot measure and we cannot analyze until at some point somebody stands up and says, and now we can measure it and now we can
Hmm.
analyze it, because we found something that helps us do that.
Hmm.
And um and so it's we don't know, as parents, you don't know what your child sees, and you don't know what your child experiences. It's
Hmm.
that's I mean, you don't even know that from your partner, or and let's be very honest, 9 out of 10 of in a day, we are so busy with organizing things, our work and everything else, we don't even know it from ourselves.
Mm.
So, having a feeling that we can, with a certain amount of certainty, say there's nothing there, is, well, um, might not be the best way forward. And
Mm.
at that moment, a child could feel like I felt, um, alone, and could feel like nobody understands me, um, with denying what this person does feel and does experience, right?
Yeah. Such a, again, such a powerful point, I feel, because even if we take out the whole um, discussion around spirituality, some people feeling there is spirituality, other people not being connected to it. The fact that we all have our own filters to this world and see reality in different ways is is clear for a long time. There's so much talk and so many studies around that. So if we just even come from that perspective, just giving that leeway and saying like, hey, that is your experience, how can I support you to feel better in that, is a very, well, a service to humankind basically, to walk around in that way.
And I think it will help the child grow up to
Mm.
be more confident about
Mm.
being able to express himself or herself.
Yeah.
The the I don't know. It's this. Oh wait, my I'm being supported, and
Mm.
it's. I think there's whether the child eventually grows up to keep this connection alive. That's something completely different. I
Mm.
mean, it's still something that grows, that through school, through friends, through busyness, mental busyness, can still be put on a very low flame, let's say, or
Mm.
even the flame can even go out completely.
Yeah.
um, that's okay, but in that process of that being okay, it's the child that determines the pace in which that flame can go out or not,
Mm.
right? And it's the child that feels supported, and that stays who they are authentically, and that
Mm.
stays true to themselves, because they get the ability and the support to stay true to who they are, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to be believed as a I think to be believed by your surroundings, and especially by your parents, is and to be supported, that's priceless.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. And now, if we jump fast forward again to that time when you started now looking for organizations that have like a spiritual basis and tuning into your ability more, how did that impact your path in life from there? And how did you start feeling differently? Did you feel more in tune? Just describe that a little.
I think these organizations were just a final step, let's say.
Mm.
Um, it would have been nice if I had those steps at the beginning, let's say, um,
Yeah.
but it was just a final step because even in the world of spirit readings, psychic abilities, um, even in that world, there is organizations that think in a certain way, right? That you
Mm-hmm.
as a person might not agree with,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so some have a type of religion in their core of it, for example, and you might not agree to that. And
Mm.
so um, these organizations, on one hand, I'm very happy that I only found them later. Um, on the other hand, it would have been helpful to know that there were much more people
Yeah.
like me and have that
Mm.
in the beginning. Um, so I think for me, developing this on my own, and well, not developing. It's more like um, sort of opening the doors and all the
Mm.
doors a little bit until they were, and I still think I'm opening them
Mm.
on many levels. I still think that some of them are just have a see-through little crack, and others are a bit more open, of course. And I think
Mm.
that's a lifetime development of unlearning what I and undoing that cap that I have.
Mm.
Um, and I think that's with a lot of people
Yeah.
in general, not even for
Mm.
mediumistic or psychic abilities. It's for a lot of people. They, in their core, in their authentic core, they have a lot of power, and they were taught to dim the flame and
Mm.
to put a cap on it and to not be so. Um, uh, I don't know, straightforward or powerful, or you're scaring people, or there's always
Mm.
something, right, that society
Mm.
teaches us, because society really just wants us to be on everybody sort of in the same range of um, of to group together. And so yes, I think it was good for me to slowly develop that on my own, to be able
Mm.
to discover, to to see where my limits are without another society, well meant or not, put their rules on me. Because now that I have that, that okay, this is where I am at, this is where I want to be at, and this is what I would like to develop here and there, open up here and there. um, it's good to have that clarity for yourself before you step into a world of somebody else, where somebody else again determines to which rules you need to abide by.
Mm.
And so yes, um, the journey has been um, I will say the journey has been challenging,
Mm.
but the challenging part of this journey was not was so many, there's so many directions in which that went, right. The challenge of this journey was first admitting it to myself, um, admitting it to myself that everything that I called intuition um, was maybe a little bit more than intuition,
Mm.
and um, then developing what I wanted, having clarity about what I wanted
Mm.
and which direction I wanted it to go and how far I wanted it to go, and that toe dipping, um, you know, finding the confidence that there was a certain control in there, and that I can control it, and that I'm sure that I can control it,
Mm.
and so um, that's finding that confidence and that balance, then opening up my hatches and receiving information. That was the next step, and only then, when I had all of that sort of clear in my mind and having clarity, and this is what I want, this is how far I can go with other people, only then did I really truly think, okay, now I'm okay with stepping into the world, like
Mm,
where I know I will be judged, and I know I will scare people, and fearful people are of course entitled, they to think something of me, and every person is entitled to think something of me, but it's and and that's getting that back, getting that feedback is a journey in itself, is
mm,
like and I must say that in my journey, if I wouldn't have had that solid base that I now have of, okay, I know what I can do, I know who I am, I I I know what I can put out there, what I have to
mm,
offer, and I'm okay with the world, or part of the world, um, giving me an uncomfortable feeling at times,
yeah.
and I'm okay with the world um, making me doubt certain things. I'm very okay, by the way, with the world making me think about how does this work in me, and
Mm,
the only way to get to the next level of anything is to take massive action, right?
mm,
To accept, to know where you're going, to get that clarity, to get awareness about what you're doing, and then just putting it out there. Take massive action into, okay, if I want to build this to the next level, this is my next big step, not
mm,
just a step, right? And so I guess now I'm at the point where that where I have been letting people know that this is part of me,
mhm,
and that it's part of my, that I don't want to um, exclude this part of me,
mm,
and um, that I want to even take it one step further and actively use it to connect with other people, and to support other people, to guide other
mm,
people in their journey. For that reason, I do. Um, so I do a lot of pay it forward. I think I told you once,
mhm,
um, where I do these spirit readings for free, um, because I think that I truly believe that everything is connected. And if I can lift one person's mood, or if I can give one person clarity about something small, or a little bit of guidance coming from the spirit world, then I love to do that. And so that's I have, this pay it forward, which also, of course, when I started that years ago, um, it also helped me, because it was like it also was a validation of what I was feeling and what I was
mm.
thinking, and so yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's so inspiring to hear such a story, because it's I feel it's not even about this specific skill or ability we are talking about. This whole conversation has been just about, this trust and acceptance of yourself, but also the beauty of the journey that every human being has. Like the way you were saying, it was good that I had to figure it out on my own and have that foundation first, because then I was absolutely ready to step into a world and say, like, oh, this works for me, no, this is not for me, and be much more clear on that.
Yeah, yeah, that really helped me. And it's I feel that um, for everything that we do,
Mm,
I think that we really do need a sort of a true north, um, of something that the reason we do these things, right?
yeah.
And um, I'm um, I think for me, so I have a very clear true north for myself, and I know why I'm doing this, and so that's also why I, um, throughout struggles and throughout negative feedback, which you're obviously also for everything that we do, right? It's
Mm,
not just
mm,
this, not just this. You
yeah.
for everything that you do, if you have if you put yourself out there in a strong way and believing something in a strong way, um, you will always have people that are with you and people that are against you and people that are somewhere in the middle, and
Mm,
and so having that getting that feedback and having that, um, you really need to have a strong true north that you are going towards, so that you know that when you tend to deviate from your path, or when you tend to listen too much to your own inner critic, because let's be honest, we all have our own inner
mhm,
critic, that when you get negative feedback, that you think, oh, maybe these people are right. Maybe
mm,
what I'm doing is crazy. Maybe I'm making all of this up. I mean, I still have that, even though
mm.
I immediately get tapped on the shoulder saying, but you know, by now, but like, don't even go there. And
Mm,
um but I had to apologize more than once
mm,
exactly because of that. And so when we get negative feedback, it's often also a, oh, and now what? Now uh, is this true? Are these people right? Am I woo woo? Am I crazy? And I can for
yeah.
sure now say, you know what? I am woo woo and I'm crazy and I'm fine
And
with
it's
that,
okay.
and it's okay. And, and it's okay. Everybody, I mean, it's all about finding, yeah, your type of people that are your type of crazy, right?
Yes.
And then and so I also, when you mentioned like this, um, there's certain boxes that, right, that people, that you tend to want to be in. I guess that, as people, we just, from a survival instinct, we want to be in a box. We want to we want to belong to a box, and that's just that survival instinct. And not wanting to be in a box automatically puts you in the box with people that don't want to be in a box. So, there's no way you can get out of that.
Mm,
Um, and so, um, uh, we have the we have community, and we have a strong will to belong and to have that feeling
mm,
of belonging. And so, um, I guess that for I went to a box where I was conform with all the rules, and with society and how people wanted me to be, how I thought I was supposed to be, into this, into this world where I thought there was nobody that I would be able to relate to. And
mm,
there was probably not one person in this world experiencing the same thing that I was. And there still isn't, but there's, now I know, now I realize that there's people that are experiencing at least something similar.
mm.
And so yes, that's part of that community feeling, I guess, that I found, um, throughout the years. So
Yes. And which I feel is much more in line with the truth, probably, to accept that I'm unique, although we are all human beings and fundamentally the same, but I'm unique as this human being, this shape I am in, and whatever I experience is unique. So there's no one who experiences exactly the same thing. But yes,
exactly.
there are people who can connect because they have maybe like similar experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
with that, I shall, because I see over an hour conversation,
Yes, I know.
we shall end this beautiful talk.
In which I don't think I ever talked this much. It took me a while to get to that. You see that little bit of possibly fear of putting it out there in the world did show up at the beginning of this conversation
Yes.
because I tried to weasel myself around. So 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 yes, it's still there, working on it. I mean, even as a mindset coach, you don't some things are, and I'm happy because of that. Even as a mindset coach, I still need mindset working. But hey,
Everyone, I mean, there's no end to growth and expansion in this world. I think we
exactly.
are never a finished product. It's just always just growing, growing. A friend of mine loves saying, we all travel towards wholeness and,
Yeah,
in growth and expansion. But thanks for being so open and for sharing this story. I found it super inspiring.
it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.